Good morning, folks. Welcome to a special edition of Unlocked. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by Kate Hoey, who is an ardent Brexiteer, has been at the forefront of the battle for Brexit for many, many years, well before I was involved in it. And we're going to talk about an array of subjects. But good morning, Kate. Thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Good morning, Ben. Lovely to join you.
And I understand you're in Belfast at the moment.
Yes, in Northern Ireland, where I'm most of the time now, unless I'm over in London, to attend the House of Lords.
Which I imagine is not as frequent as it might otherwise have been in sort of pre-COVID times.
The House of Lords is not what I even knew of it from having been in Member of Parliament for 30 years and seeing the Lords at work various times. It's very different. There's no spontaneity now. There's no definite ruling that you will get a question. You have to ballot for practically everything. Yeah. And there's no interruptions and nobody can get up and have a go at you, so it's a very kind of funereal atmosphere. But still, there's some things we can achieve.
It reminds me of the European Parliament, where everything is utterly controlled. You know, there's no banter, unless, of course, it's the Brexit Party causing a hell of a ruckus, in which case there is a bit of a banter.
I was always amazed how very short times you got to speak in the European Parliament too, although even in the Lords now, everything's much more programmed. The House of Commons people were very, they could go on for ages unless there was some really tight rule, and which didn't happen too much. So the House of Lords is very much like, I don't think anything could be as awful and dreadful as the European Parliament. And the House of Lords actually, when it works normally, I think it's pretty good.
Funny enough, when we left we'll get on to the subject of the day, but when we left the European Parliament, a number of MEPs came up to me and said they're going to miss the Brexit Party because we brought the whole thing to life.
Yeah. There were some brilliant speeches. I remember seeing them and thinking, and you could see the sort of shocked faces, not just of, people at the top table, but other delegates. And I'm sure an awful lot of them, a lot of those other MEPs, were quite envious of you all in the Brexit Party.
Oh, well, for us, it was a laugh. We were there to cause trouble. We were there to make them want to get rid of us.
And they did.
It worked quite well. But let's get on to our main subjects, Kate, if that's all right. Now, I wasn't going to talk about Northern Ireland, but I think it would be entirely wrong not to talk about it. So can we start with Northern Ireland and have your take on what's been going on over the last couple of weeks with the invocation of Article 16 by the EU, the difficulty of trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland and back again, Michael Gove's recent letter to the Vice President of the Commission. How do you see the status of Northern Ireland? More particularly, what sort of solutions do you see, Kate, to the kind of what seems like an intractable problem?
Well, it's a very, very long story, and I get even more angry every day when I hear of something new, some new thing that has to happen or can't happen as a result exactly of the protocol. A lot of people say, oh, it's all to do with Brexit. It's not to do with Brexit. Reality is Northern Ireland had the same ballot paper as the rest of the United Kingdom, which said, do you want to leave the UK, to leave the European Union or not? And those who voted in Northern Ireland, 44%, not as small as some people try to make out, voted to leave. They voted for the UK to leave, not for Northern Ireland to be left in this kind of halfway house of being part of the single market and part of the customs union, and having to obey rules from the European Union that will change as time goes on. And Northern Ireland people or Northern Ireland politicians, from whatever side of the community they come, will have absolutely no say in those rules. So I think that, it is beginning to really hit home to those members of the House of Commons who voted for the whole withdrawal agreement, because I don't think they really understood. I genuinely don't think they thought about it in the way that we're now seeing happen. So they're quite shocked. I've spoken to many of my former colleague friends, and they are quite shocked at all these things that are happening.
I mean,
So
it's
the
kind
protocol,
of,
there can never be a good protocol. You know, a protocol, the protocol can't be tinkered about and, oh, well, we'll change that bit and maybe change this little bit. The protocol is actually dividing Northern Ireland from the rest of the United Kingdom. And as the United Kingdom diverge more and more and more, Northern Ireland will be further and further away from Great Britain, from the United Kingdom. And of course, there are some people who actually want that to happen. So that's what makes it even more, people more angry.
And do you think there's a motivation in Westminster for that to happen? I mean, I don't want to be conspiracy theorist about this, but is there a feeling that, well, you know, it's such a blooming hassle having to deal with Northern Ireland. You know, this is a neat solution to get Brexit done. It'll take some time for the truth to reveal itself, and by then it'll all be a done deal. There'll be another plebiscite in Northern Ireland, and hopefully they'll, you know, vote to join a united Ireland. Do you think there's a kind of hidden agenda here that we're missing?
I don't think genuinely that is true of either the Prime Minister, even Michael Gove, who was a very staunch unionist, certainly at one time, or members of the Conservative and Unionist Party, because that's its title. I don't think that that is the political view. I think that is probably view held by, and we've known this for a long time, probably held by quite a lot of senior diplomats and civil servants in the Foreign Office who perhaps always had that kind of feeling of, you know, Northern Ireland is a nuisance. But I genuinely think that the government got into this partly because of way back Theresa May's attitude and the whole question of the backstop. And then just the European Union realizing, not actually at the referendum, just after the referendum, none of this came up. It was sometime later in 2017 that the European Union, I think, saw, partly because they'd been pushed to it by the Irish government, that this was a way of kind of making Brexit difficult for Great Britain. And we know that there were people, I mean, I didn't personally hear them say, but there were very strongly held views that commissioners and various members at the top echelon of the European Union had said, you know, Brexit, your price will be, you have to pay as Northern Ireland. Yeah. So, you know, we have to, but the danger, of course, for the government or for anybody who thinks that, well, let's get rid of Northern Ireland, that make it much easier, that actually the link between Northern Ireland and Scotland is actually the Ulster Scots, and the whole question of that is very, very strong as well. So, you know, I do think you can't actually look at Scotland and independence and Northern Ireland and independence in isolation. The two things are quite linked. And there's absolutely no doubt about it that if, and I don't see it happening genuinely in my lifetime, any united Ireland, but if it were to come, I think Scotland then would be much, much more difficult to hold on. And I don't think any Prime Minister, and certainly not Boris Johnson, wants to be seen as someone who has helped to break up the union.
But I mean, his protocol, you know, his protocol, a cursory glance, a cursory reading of it indicates, you know, quite plainly that Northern Ireland has a new constitutional status within the United Kingdom. So it sort of beggars belief, doesn't it, that
yes,
they won an 80-seat majority without really understanding what it was they were promoting and voting for.
Exactly, absolutely, you're absolutely right. And the thing that has sort of made this all so easy, in inverted commas, for some people is the whole question of the Belfast Agreement, the Good Friday Agreement. And that has just, you know, if I hear somebody say one more time, oh, and we must protect the Good Friday Agreement, as if that is supposed to be the real reason why the protocol has happened. Now, that was the excuse. That was what was used by all of those who argued, you know, over and over again, oh, you know, the Belfast Agreement was such a wonderful agreement. It was spent so long to get, we can't destroy it. And it's just such nonsense, because anyone who's read the Good Friday Agreement knows that the question of the frontier, as I call it, between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland was only discussed in the context of reducing numbers of soldiers, the army, and, you know, not having huge new infrastructures, but really not going back to what was there during the whole time of the Troubles. And what was most dreadful, I think, was Varadkar, the former Taoiseach of the Republic, went to the European Union with a picture of something that had been blown up, one of the customs posts at the border, and basically held that up and said, oh, if we don't get this, people will be blowing up structures again. Now, apart from the fact that actually I don't think that was going to happen, that should not have been used to get something that was actually breaking up the United Kingdom. That was used as a kind of allowing the threat of violence to decide public policy. And we should have been saying, no, if that happens, both the Irish government and Northern Ireland would be catching these people. So that's been where it's all. And now, of course, we've got the Belfast Agreement is being broken. If it was ever going to be broken by a north-south border, it's certainly being broken by an east-west border, because that was part of the quid pro quo, that north-south relations were important, but east-west relations, west-east relations were very, very important to people in Northern Ireland, and most of our trade goes to Great Britain and Great Britain to Northern Ireland. So the whole thing has been so badly based on something that wasn't true, and on fear and on ignorance of what the situation really is. Well, so it makes me quite cross. I get quite cross now.
It gets me very cross as well. And, you know, I'm a bit shy of wishing to use military metaphors, but actually the EU, together with Ireland, did weaponize the border issue. And they've peddled this false narrative, which has become so entrenched that we actually saw Boris Johnson. You know, you and I in the Sunday Express this morning, having written a joint article with Arlene and Sammy, you know, they weaponized it to the point where even Boris Johnson believes that the Belfast Agreement prohibits a border on the island of Ireland. When in fact, actually, the Belfast Agreement makes multiple references to the border and invokes a respect of the border, you know, and to have customs checks, whether at the border or away from the border, is not prohibited in any sense whatsoever by the Belfast Agreement.
No, and the irony is, Ben, if you go back and forward, and, you know, as I have done over the years, there are cameras at the border. Anyway, I mean, Theresa May had that great thing. We must have no cameras. There are already cameras at the border. When you pass from the Republic of Ireland to Northern Ireland, the speed limit changes, the signs change, and
the currency changes.
The tax rates change. Kilometers. Yeah, we go from kilometers to miles, and everything changes. The weather changes too. It gets much nicer in Northern Ireland. But I genuinely find it just so incomprehensible that people do not actually want to understand this. I think more and more are, and I think more and more of the ERG group within Parliament, who I think many of them are feeling very, very guilty. But you have to look back at the context and at the time, and there was a desperate fear that Brexit was going to be lost and we wouldn't get a trade arrangement and all these things. And I that's why I'm still very confident that finally the government will wake up to realise that this just is not going to be sustainable. And also the EU have put a cart and horses right through the protocol by doing what they did the week before last. Yeah,
invoking Article 16. And actually, ironically, paradoxically, the way out for Northern Ireland is Article 16, isn't it? And I know that Arlene Foster motivated a petition 2 days ago, and I think within 24 hours it hit the magic 100,000 figure, which would require Parliament to consider an invocation of Article 16. So how do you see that playing out now, Kate? And what steps would you like to see Boris Johnson taking in order to put right this invidious protocol that has been foisted on Northern Ireland?
Well, of course, the Prime Minister and Michael Gove and all of them, they always try to speak, perhaps understandably, in very diplomatic language. I find that much more difficult. And certainly when I was in the Home Office and went out to Europe long before the EU, long before we were, it was actually the EU before we were in majority, while we still had majority voting, I find it very difficult to be diplomatic. But the Prime Minister, but he did repeatedly say in the last week that they would consider invoking Article 16. And I think it's made it much easier for the government after what the EU did. So I would like to see, I mean, I think perhaps they could have one very, very high level meeting and say, this isn't going to happen. We are not going to have our people at Larne and Belfast stopping lorries. Now, ironically, because of the sort of threats that we're not quite sure where they came from, but the threats to people who worked there, which obviously should not have happened, they removed the people, and lorries were coming through without being checked. So the world didn't end. You know, it became quite a normal thing for a few days. And I think that the government, the Prime Minister, Michael Gove, have to play hardball now. They've got the opportunity, and they've got to show that they're not going to be walked over, and that they're not going to abandon even more people in Northern Ireland who've been left under this ridiculous single market. No, the whole of the United Kingdom should have left together.
Yeah.
And then we could sort out some of these issues, because there are ways of sorting it out that don't involve huge structures at the frontier. Well, which is what people were worried about.
Couldn't agree more. And the other irony is that the EU itself produced a paper in November 2017, which concludes, it opens and concludes with the fact that you can have a smart border on the island of Ireland, that there's no need for physical checks at the border, that you can have number plate recognition, trusted trader schemes, declarations made away from the border, a paperless system, done through the internet. Everything is in that paper in 2017, produced by the EU. And then something changed. As you say, I think it was Leo Varadkar clearly getting onto them. And they saw an opportunity to use the border against the United Kingdom. And it's going to take a lot of political will now, isn't it, for the government to get on top of this? And actually, because the only solution, Kate, as far as I can see it, is the border has to go, the customs border has to go where it should have gone in the first place, which is at the existing border.
Yes, I mean, my view is that it doesn't actually have to be at the frontier. If it's the European Union and the Irish government who are concerned about their precious single market and some screws of a different size or whatever going through into the Republic when they've come over from Great Britain, it might be a different size at some stage when the EU don't like it, then the lorries should come into Northern Ireland freely, do all that they have to do in Northern Ireland. And if they are then going and bound for the European Union via the Republic of Ireland, then when they're in the Republic of Ireland, it doesn't have to be at the frontier. They can still go over. And if they want to stop them and search them, so be it. I mean, it's not, there should be free trade. There's no tariffs. So what are they worried about? And the irony is we're so much aligned at the moment anyway, the whole of United Kingdom and the EU, because of the rule changes, that there's absolutely no need for any of this.
No.
Other than what normally has happened over many years. If animals are being brought in to Northern Ireland, there are some checks on that, and that's understandable. That's for purely health reasons. So I think there are solutions to this. It is a question of political will now. The technical solutions are there. We know about trader schemes that would allow people who go back and forward across the border every day not to be interrupted. People are still moving, and ironically, you may have not noticed, but just this weekend, the Irish government announced that from Monday they are going to allow people to be stopped coming over from Northern Ireland and asked, are their journeys absolutely essential?
I saw that.
So I mean, no one ever would define what a hard border was, but there was this sort of idea of a hard border being huge infrastructures and all of that. So to me, that is just as much a hard border. If the Irish government is stopping Northern Ireland citizens going over and down to drive to see somebody and using COVID as the reason. But, doesn't that again show a little bit of double standards, hypocrisy?
Absolutely. Complete double standards. Twice in the last 2 weeks, either Ireland or the EU has invoked a hard border, as they call it, on the island, having said for 4 years that it would be something that would be abhorrent and unacceptable to them. It's an extraordinary situation.
The world would end. And by the way, that petition, which I was so grateful for so many people in England signing it. You know, it was really wonderful. After I tweeted it and a few others tweeted it on the numbers were just fantastic, and it's still going up and up and up. Now, a petition is only a petition. We will get a debate about that, but with the way things are in the Commons and the Lords with COVID and all, it's not. You know, it was part of, I think, it helps people to feel they've been doing something. Yeah. And signing a petition gives them some feeling that they have done something. But of course, that's very, very little in the overall scale of things. And I want to see now, as Arlene Foster has said they will do, is to look at the north-south bodies, because east-west has been disrupted. So why should we meet in bodies with the Irish government? You know, why should they continue if we're not going to have east-west?
Agreed. So just moving on from Northern Ireland, but tangentially related to it, and you touched on it earlier, you know, we've got the threat, if that's the right word to use, of another referendum in Scotland. And it looks to me, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, that Nicola Sturgeon is going to stand on a platform for another independence referendum, and probably she's going to win a thumping majority. So do you think we're going to see another referendum in Scotland quite soon? And how do you think that may play out, particularly with an EU now, Kate, that is openly hostile to the UK's best interests, and probably, I suspect, is going to be aiding and abetting Nicola Sturgeon in her effort to kick the UK in the shins, as it were? You know, what's your take on all of that?
I certainly think that Nicola Sturgeon has shown her that she's no patriot at all for the United Kingdom. Of course, we knew that, but her close relationship with the EU and the way that, you know, she looks like she deals with them first before she talked to the United Kingdom government is pretty scandalous. I would be very against having another independent referendum. I always think back to 1975 when I first voted in an EU referendum, and I had to wait 45 years nearly now to get another referendum. So it was meant to be a referendum in Scotland for a generation, and a generation isn't the number of years that it's been since the last one. I mean, the Prime Minister is going to be put in a very tough position, because obviously if the Scottish Nationalists win and they have a manifesto to say they want another referendum, that's going to make the UK government look like they're being deliberately obstructionist. But I think I'm not so sure, you know, that they will do as well as perhaps they thought 6 months ago. And, you know, if only the parties in Scotland would do a little bit of that unifying and work together across the political parties to make sure that in certain seats there's a very good chance of defeating the Scottish Nationalists. I think that I would support that. I mean, I know George Galloway is doing quite a lot of work trying to get that to happen. But of course, the two main parties, particularly, and of course the Lib Dems, they do tend to be very tribal when it comes to elections and not want to give ground. I mean, we have that in Northern Ireland too, where I just get, you know, tear my hair out sometimes at how the Unionist Party and the Democratic Unionist Party end up sort of fighting each other, yet they have the same overall aims. And I think maybe we need some of that in Scotland. It would be, you know, to lose Scotland would be a huge blow. And I just don't see it. I genuinely don't see it happening. But I would prefer not to have to go through it all again, another referendum.
And do you know, one of the reasons I think for the problems across the union has really been, you know, the initial steps that Tony Blair took for devolution. That's what I think. It's a personal view. And I personally also feel that greater devolution's not the answer. I don't think, you know, you're going to get the buy-in of Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland to any greater extent by giving, you know, devolving further power. But do you see some possibility that a more generous settlement from Westminster, greater self-governance might, you know, lance this boil? Or do you think the boil now, you know, needs another way of being dealt with?
I very much of the old Tam Dalyell school, who was the very idea that, you know, and other people said it at the time, you know, devolution was meant to lance the boil, as they say, of independence. And of course, what it did do was to simply allow even more and more movement towards a feeling of independence. Scotland's made up of people who've got all sorts of different views, like Northern Ireland has and Wales has. And I personally feel, and it'll not happen because we've gone too far down the road, but I've always been more of an integrationist, certainly as far as Northern Ireland's concerned. I genuinely didn't see the reason and the need for its own government. I think local councils should be much stronger. Local government should be much stronger throughout the United Kingdom, and also in Northern Ireland. Of course, we don't even have full-time mainstream parties. The Conservative Party organises here and puts up candidates, not in every seat. Labour Party allows membership, but doesn't even allow people to join. So, if we had stronger United Kingdom focused political parties and strong local government, I really don't see the necessity for strengthening devolution. And we've seen that over the way we've handled COVID. I mean, it hasn't been particularly helpful to have every part of the United Kingdom doing different things. They may have had to do different things, but that should have come from a United Kingdom government working rather than individual countries. And particularly when you have different political parties from the opposite, Wales having an opposition party leading it, they're bound to want to always do things that are going to make themselves look like they're different from the government, better than the government. We get that in Scotland too, of course.
So in an ideal world, I know I would, I'd seek to effectively abolish Holyrood and, give representation through one unified parliament. It needn't be in London, but it happens to be in London, but one unified parliament for the United Kingdom. Is that how you think as well? Strong local government, but no need for these national assemblies.
I think we need a proper discussion again on, and the COVID situation has led to that maybe happening afterwards, that we can talk about just where we're going. And of course, that would lead to maybe one way of doing it. As I'm very conscious that the House of Lords is not an elected house, and therefore we are there to scrutinise and guide and give our opinions, but we ultimately shouldn't be stopping the government, who have an elected mandate, whatever party, doing what they think is right. But maybe the House of Lords could be looked at in terms of, that's where you get your representation from the different parts of the United Kingdom. So there are ways of doing this, but it needs some thought. And I think devolution originally was kind of, it was the answer to what they saw as a crisis about looming independence or growing views for independence. And I think that, we need to do it carefully now and think again about what might happen. And of course, I don't think, the Scottish Nationalist Party have used leaving the European Union as their big plus point. But as we go forward and see more success coming from leaving, as we've seen already, then I think that will die down as well and make it more difficult for the Scottish Nationalists, because they will have to be arguing that they want to change their currency and they want to, do all the things that you have to do to get into a very failing bloc, the European Union, which hopefully one or two other countries may have decided by then anyway to decide to do what the United Kingdom has done.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think I had always hoped and expected that Brexit would in fact tie the union closer together, and it should do, because, united, the United Kingdom is much stronger outside the European Union. And it's now really up to our government to take advantage of Brexit and make sure that everyone is better off from it. One of the disappointments for me, and I don't want to talk about fishing in great detail, but one of the disappointments was that we didn't really take back full control of fishing, because can you imagine the case Nicola Sturgeon would have to make to the Scottish people if, having got back control of fishing, she was then wanting to hand it all back to the EU?
Yeah. I think that was one of the saddest parts of the whole trade agreement, really, the whole fishing thing. I mean, I understand that, fishing communities have been devastated and fishing fleets have been devastated, and there is need for in the investment to build those up over a period of time. And perhaps we couldn't have absolutely taken back and fished everywhere, but we should have been able to have taken back and then immediately said, okay, and for the next year or two, you can do this, that, and the other. But we signed up to something that was way, way below what I had wanted to see, and certainly what the fishing communities had wanted to see. And I think that was a big disappointment. And you're absolutely right. It's played into the hands of some of those communities, those people in Scotland who now can say that. It would have been great to have been able to say, well, they're going to, and of course, it's still a little bit helpful that we have got some back, but not as much and not as quickly as it should have been.
Yeah. So just moving on from Brexit now, and can we talk a little bit about London, which is? Is
there anything after Brexit? Is there anything to discuss apart from Brexit?
Sorry, no, but you're right. I mean, as kind of triggered as I am by Brexit, even I'm beginning to think there must be something more to life than
Brexit. Exactly. I agree.
But can we talk a bit about London, which was your home? And, you were MP for Vauxhall for 30 years, I think. And, how do you see the landscape in London? We've got the mayoral elections coming up in May. London is facing, I think, an existential threat from the collapse in travel, the hospitality sector, services generally. We've obviously got a threat from Frankfurt and Paris. I don't take that threat as a serious one, by the way. But we've got, a threat to financial services. How do you see London and its prospects, as we come out of COVID? And if I can draw you on it, if you're prepared to express a view, what do you make of Sadiq Khan?
Well, I didn't support Sadiq Khan when I was a member of the Labour Party for mayoral candidate. And I genuinely don't think he's done a particularly good job. I would find it very difficult if I'd been still an active member of the Labour Party to be supporting him. I mean, he has become obsessed about sort of certain narrow kind of issues that appeal to some of the people in the party that he wants to keep their support. And I think he has absolutely destroyed the London taxi industry and all at the very laudable attempt to get more people to cycle. But, that has been tried by the previous mayor who got the free cycling going and all of that, and the certain number of cycle lanes. And it now seems to have become almost an obsession. And when I do go to London now and I look around at how many streets have been closed and one-way systems, and the poor taxi drivers can't even go down pretty main roads to pick up somebody or deliver somebody. I just think it's very, very sad. It's almost as if he does not want people to be driving in London. Well, there's an awful lot of businesses rely on small white vans to deliver things more and more. And I just feel London has been, it's not the same as it was. And I don't have that feeling of love for it that I had for all those years when I used to love London. Well, but I just think it's very sad. And I think we're going to see more and more of those big office blocks either being left empty or turned into perhaps living accommodation. But then will people really want to live in central London anymore?
If there's no commerce, people won't be coming, will they? It seems to me that he's got these pet agendas that you mentioned, and he's turned his back. And I think it's something symptomatic. And again, I'd love your view. It's symptomatic, I think, of the Labour Party. It's turned its back on the working class, the very people it was set up to represent. So, this war on motorists that Sadiq Khan is waging, as you say, hits white van workers. It hits essential workers who've had to get to hospitals and back during the course of the pandemic. This lockdown and working from home has favoured public servants, the upper and middle classes, and it's the working class, who Labour are meant to represent, who were hammered, who had to go on working, keeping London going to the extent that it has been going, keeping essential services moving forward, and yet he's attacking them. And it seems to me the Labour Party itself is doing that. You look at the policies in Westminster, and you look, I don't want to go back to Brexit, but the red wall and the blue-collar workers who wanted Brexit, but you had a leadership that was intent on ignoring those views. So Where's the Labour Party? Is it a party that's finished, do you reckon, Kate?
Well, I don't think it's finished, but I do think that the kind of writings by people like Paul Embry, who's written very vividly about why Labour did so badly in the red wall seats and how difficult it's going to be to win those people back, are quite right. I mean, the Labour Party has become, and it was even in my, I had an inner city constituency, Vauxhall, right in the heart of London, with a very large ethnic minority population. The Labour Party, the final, I remember the year or two just before I finished being an MP, having a picture of all our members of our general committee, which is the big committee. And we'd had a lot of new members after Jeremy Corbyn, huge numbers of new members. And that room, which had about 80 people in it, I think there were 4 black or ethnic minority faces. You know, so and in inner city London, which had part of Brixton in it, the Labour Party was a white, middle class, public sector, charity worker organisation. And they had very little, many of them had very little contact with people living in their own community. And so now, if that is replicated, if that's what it's like in London, you know, I can see that up in certain parts of those red wall seats, the people who were perhaps, you know, working very hard, some of them from working class backgrounds, members of the party, must have found it so insulting, really, to have the whole of the kind of Labour Party emphasis was on not on doing things in those areas and getting things better, but on sort of areas, attitudes to do with, you know, the whole question of all the kind of, and I don't really like the word, but I can't think of a better word, of the sort of woke issues that are important to some people and are important overall to solve, but not to become the priority for the party. And that's what was happening. And to win that back, to change that, is going to be very difficult, I think, for the Labour Party. And I don't really see any sign of it happening.
Well, Keir Starmer strikes me as someone who is part of that kind of Islington set, you know, without wishing myself to, you know, pigeonhole him too much. But he's suave, he's sophisticated, he's a barrister, he obviously has done very well in life. You know, he doesn't seem to me to be a natural representative of the working class, you know, which, as I say, which is where Labour started, which is what the whole point of the Labour Party was.
Well, of course, you can come from a very rich background and a very sort of have all sorts of privileges and still be able to relate to people and to work with people from different backgrounds and different classes. But, you know, you've either kind of got it or you haven't. Yeah. And I'm not sure. I mean, the jury is very much out on Sir Keir Starmer. He doesn't like being called Sir, but he is Sir Keir Starmer, apparently. No, so you know, I really don't. He was never someone that I knew particularly well, because obviously during the last 4 or 5 years, he was the main Labour Party pro-EU campaigner and was pushing very hard against poor Jeremy, who really didn't want to change policy. He was pushing very hard to get a second referendum agreed to and that kind of thing. It was when we agreed when the party decided to campaign for a second referendum on the EU, that was when I left the party. And I was not going to stand again anyway after 30 years. But it was just one of those little things that, final thing, I thought, right, that's it. Having opposed Labour on so many issues.
Was that heartbreaking for you, Kate, personally, having to leave a party to which you really dedicated most of your working life?
I think what was heartbreaking was knowing that there were so many decent, ordinary, just lovely members of our party, and not members but supporters all over the country, who just felt betrayed. And, you know, I had done the rallies all around the country during the election. I had spoken to them and said, you know, there are some Labour MPs, we will blah, 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 and whatever happens, we will respect the result. And we didn't respect the result. And I couldn't live with that. So no, it wasn't heartbreaking to actually leave the party, because I always said in that, you know, it's probably a bit of a cliche, but I mean, the party did actually, I felt, leave me, because there were just so many issues that I felt out of step with. And I'm quite independent. And I you know, I'm not very good at being told what to do. So I probably wasn't a very easy member of Parliament all those years, because there were certain things that for example, 24-hour licensing I voted against, and people said, oh, that's shocking, well, and so many of these issues that you vote against, like ID cards and things, and eventually turn around and the policy got changed. But
yeah.
So I can be right too, even if I'm independent minded.
Well, it's terrific to have you in the House of Lords, and to know that you're going to go on voicing your opinion, whether or not it meets with, with the powers that be's approval. It's terrific, because actually in the Commons at the moment, it seems to me we haven't really got much of an opposition. So we do need strong voices in the Lords speaking out for common sense for the British people. We're probably way over time. I haven't even looked at my watch, Kate. I've got no idea, because I've enjoyed the conversation so much.
Oh, yes, we are. We're quite a long time, I think, now. People will be fed up watching.
Well, we can edit some of this out. But before we finish, I just want to know, so what next for Kate Hoey? She's been a forceful campaigner, a champion of Brexit. You've gone against the grain when you've had to. The job for Northern Ireland still has to be, there's still a huge job in Northern Ireland. The Union of the United Kingdom still needs to be, held. What next for you, Kate? How do you see, or are you going to retire and go for long walks? How do you see yourself now?
Well, I did, when I stopped being an MP, I sort of thought, oh, that's great. I can do some traveling. I can go visit my sister in America a lot more. I can go back to the farm at home and do things. And then, of course, I heard I was going into the Lords a few months later, and then it was a few months before I was actually put into the Lords officially. And so I've kind of never quite retired as such, although I have spent a lot of time going through old folders and photographs and things like that. And that's been quite fun, looking at what you've done years ago and remembering all the little campaigns you were involved in locally and all the lovely people that you worked with. So that's been nice. But no, I think you mentioned quite a few things, and I think if I could deal with even half of those, I'd still be pretty busy. But it does mean you don't have as a constituency MP, you are absolutely bound to be in your constituency so much. And I don't have that anymore now. And I can choose my issues, but I don't want to be just seen as someone who's involved with sort of, Brexit and Northern Ireland. I mean, there are a number of issues. I'm very concerned about the number of suicides amongst young people. That's a big issue, particularly amongst young men. I'm going to get involved in issues to do with, keep involved with Zimbabwe, which I've always been very supportive of and traveled to undercover a number of times during the worst of their problems. And read a bit more, listen to a bit more music, enjoy myself.
Well, we would very much like to have you back at Unlocked, and to go on prevailing on you for your wisdom, if that's all right with you, Kate, and have you back for one of these.
And thank you, Ben. I want to thank you formally for everything you've done, because as someone who I know wasn't that knowledgeable or involved with Northern Ireland when you first visited, and it's just been amazing how you've stood up for Northern Ireland, and people over here do really, really respect you for doing that, and for visiting Enniskillen and seeing the border trail, and meeting many of the victims of horrible, horrible terrorism. So thank you.
I know. Thank you, Kate, and thank you for hosting me so brilliantly that trip. It was an eye-opener for me, and I am utterly engaged. I think I suffer to a degree from OCD. So now that I am triggered, I'm going to be on it.
Yeah. Well, that's I didn't know that. I don't think you do.
Thank you very much, Kate, for coming on.
Thank you.
It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.